President Tsai Ing-wen's alma mater has finally added its voice to the months-long debate over the legitimacy of her doctoral degree. Charges of fraud have swirled around Tsai's degree since May.
The London School of Economics and Political Science replied to the allegations on its website with a statement that confirmed it had in fact awarded Tsai a PhD in law back in 1984.
President Tsai's dissertation has been a focus of debate for nearly half a year. At long last, LSE has issued a statement. In a statement posted to its website on October 8th, the school said it had received many queries about Tsai's academic status. It said the records of the university confirm that Tsai had been awarded a doctorate in law in 1984.
This issue has molded on and on. Now even the university has had to come out with an explanation. I feel enough is enough. There is no need to keep spinning in circles over this matter.
LSE was established in 1895. In 1990, it became a member institution of the University of London. Up until 2008, the University of London issued all LSE degrees, including the doctorate of President Tsai. At a recent press conference, the presidential office released Tsai's doctoral dissertation as well as evidence that she had passed her oral exams.
Well, this report from October 10th, 2019 hasn't aged well. Did the presidential office really release evidence that Tsai Ing-wen had an oral examination in 1983? The report also doesn't show a screenshot of the so-called LSE declaration that Tsai actually got her PhD. So here's the report in the press section of the LSE website on October 8th, 2019. This is what everybody Googles and finds to find out if Tsai Ing-wen really has a PhD, and this is what everyone quotes to prove that she actually has the PhD. However, is the statement really true? And is it even from the school? Let's take a look at a key paragraph in the statement. The Senate House Library records confirm that a copy was received and sent by them to the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, IALS. There is a listing of Dr. Tsai's thesis, Unfair Trade Practices and Safeguard Actions, in the IALS Index document Legal Research in the United Kingdom 1905 to 1984, which was published in 1985. Now, based on this paragraph, it appears that the thesis is in the Senate House Library as well as the IALS Library. Therefore, we should be able to find the thesis in both libraries' computer records even if the physical copy has been lost. Now, this is a video of talk show host Dennis Peng going into the IALS library. After an extensive search in the computer system, he was not able to find Tsai Ing-wen's thesis under her name or under her so-called title, Unfair Trade Practices and Safeguard Actions. Later, he also went to the Senate House Library and looked extensively in the computer system and could not find this thesis under her name or the so-called title. If you would like to view these videos, you can click on the links below. So this article supposedly posted by LSE to their In the Press section isn't even factually correct. People can easily fact check the contents of the article, but yet they don't do that. It is very easy to verify that this is in fact a false statement. Her thesis has to be in the IALS library and the Senate House Library in order for it to be real. It has to be in both of those libraries in order for her degree to be legitimate. Also, this downloadable version of her thesis posted in 2019 doesn't mean anything unless it's the alleged 1983 version that was turned in. However, it's just a personal copy that was posted in 2019. It is not proof that she went through an oral examination in 1983 or got her PhD in 1984.
这件事情这个现在大家也都知道了，这个时间久了，很多东西就是在要去找出来，确实是有困难的了哈。那这个好了，我只能对我自己的事情讲清楚了。我的论文没问题，我的学位是真的啦，哈。那不要在这事情上做无谓的文章。
For example, Tsai says her viva took place in October 16, 1983, which her sister supposedly accompanied her to. This picture of Tsai's sisters was taken in Boston, USA. However, Tsai claims it was taken in London around the time her viva took place. The student record shows Tsai withdrew from her course in November 1982. That's what it says at the bottom of the record right here. WD from course on November 10, 1982. So if Tsai really withdrew from LSE in 1982, according to UK immigration law at the time, she would have had to have left the country within 2 months of the date she withdrew because she didn't have a visa. Even Tsai's sister said by 1982 they were both back in Taiwan. What did she do after returning to Taiwan in 1982? Well, let's take a look. Before May 1983, Tsai was already back in Taiwan looking for work. This form proves that. If you look over here, Tsai wrote she expected to return to Taiwan in May 1983. Tsai wrote herself in this form that she would finish her PhD in May 1983 as well. She filled in this form, this entire form herself. Here she says she got her PhD in May 1983. Her thesis topic is also written on this form. I need to point this out because this will reveal a lot of inconsistencies later on. On this form and on her student record, Tsai said her thesis was titled Unfair Trade Practices and Safeguard Actions. This is the title we're all familiar with. The presidential office says that this is the title Tsai proposed to her school in January 1983. This is the title she wrote on all of her employment forms later on. So in 2015, she wrote this thesis and wanted to get it entered into LSE's library. The thesis made it into the ethos database as Unfair Trade Practices and Safeguard Actions. That title also appears in an Institute of Advanced Legal Studies database, which lists legal research written between 1984 and 1985. Unfair Trade Practice and Safeguard Actions became Tsai's associated thesis title. No one has seen Tsai Ing-wen's thesis. Does that include NCCU? The school was very generous with her, allowing her to include incomplete portions of her thesis in their June and December 1983 legal review as a PhD from LSE. That gave her the necessary precedence to say she was published. Obviously, NCCU did not do their proper part when publishing her legal review. As we pointed out earlier, everywhere else, Tsai referred to her thesis as Unfair Practices and Safeguard Actions. But in this file I received, which Tsai used to get credential verification directly from the Education Ministry, she called her thesis something else. She called it Law of Subsidies, Dumping and Market Safeguards. We've never heard of this title, have we? She never mentioned it anywhere else, and this would be the 6th separate title we've found for Tsai's thesis so far. But this title carries weight because it was written on an Education Ministry document. The Higher Education Department head told us that the black leather-bound book was the thesis Tsai sent to the Education Ministry. How scary is that? NCCU not only didn't check Tsai's thesis, but when she sent it to the Education Ministry, she couldn't get the title right. This form here shows Tsai's information for when she was applying for a promotion. Unfair is listed as her thesis here. So my deduction is that Tsai wrote a thesis outline when she was getting her Master's of Philosophy at LSE using the subsidies title, but it didn't pass. That outline was the only work she had, but it was inadequate. So when she came back to Taiwan without a thesis, she started lying using subsidies. She lied her way to Liu Tiezhen and used the non-thesis, to get into NCCU. When she absolutely had to have a thesis to show to the education ministry, she used the work from her MPhil.
This letter, which Rachel McGuire wrote, was sent to Michael Richardson. It says here Tsai's viva took place on October 16, 1983. This is the immigration agency's information on Tsai Ing-wen's travel history. This information appeared in Professor Peng's case files. It says Tsai left Taiwan for London on Saturday to attend her viva, which is absolutely ridiculous. Let's take a look at Tsai Ing-wen's response, her response to ThesisGate. She very simply says that her thesis was lost. She wrote this letter in English. This letter is included in the digital copy of her thesis available at LSE's library. Originally, LSE's library had the black leather-bound thesis, right? Well, that black book has been taken off the shelves because it's missing 6 pages among other issues. So in its place, the school offers the digital copy. This digital copy has its own entry in the library's catalog, which was created July 2019. That digital thesis includes this letter. In the letter, Tsai says she completed her thesis in 1983 and that she submitted it when she graduated. She says that this library lost her thesis. Her letter says this library. I don't know which library she's talking about in her letter. Is it talking about the LSE library, or a University of London library, or IALS? The letter doesn't say. It only says this library. Tsai Ing-wen is lying in this letter. Did she complete a thesis in 1983? Did she participate in a viva? If that's all true, then why couldn't she even get her thesis title right in her employment records? Why did the thesis become Law of Subsidies, Dumping, and Market Safeguards? It's impossible. I just said that in 1984, the University of London was the one that had the right to give out degrees. The University of London was the degree awarding body, not LSE, not IALS. Publications from LSE and IALS are not enough to substantiate Tsai's degree. That is something everyone must realize. Why is it that out of over 100 graduating PhD candidates in 1984, Tsai Ing-wen is the only one whose thesis can't be found at the school? It's not in any school libraries. IALS doesn't even have a record of the thesis entering its collection. Tsai Ing-wen is the only one. What is the reasoning behind the thinking that revealing Tsai Ing-wen's examiners' identities will result in her damage or distress? The only reasonable explanation for those 3 questions is that Tsai Ing-wen did not submit a proper thesis, nor did she obtain a PhD. This is something that the University of London does not have the courage to admit. This is the ICO's letter saying that it believes Tsai Ing-wen's thesis was lost sometime between 1980 and 2010. Tsai Ing-wen on September 28, 1984 wrote on an NCCU employment history form a completely different thesis title. She said in that form that her thesis title was Law of Subsidies, Dumping, and Market Safeguards. Professor He went over this earlier as well. This thesis title is different from the one Tsai put on the black leather-bound book she sent to LSE on June 24, 2019. It is a completely different title. The black book is Unfair Trade Practices and Safeguard Actions, a far cry from this new title. Tsai Ing-wen says she got her PhD on March 14, 1984, which was half a year before she filled out that form. She forgot her thesis title half a year after she graduated? How could she have gotten her thesis title wrong? Back then, Tsai did not have a thesis with the Unfair Trade title. She did, however, have a work with the Law of Subsidies title. She did not make a mistake. The appearance of this thesis title tells us Tsai Ing-wen did not complete unfair trade practices and safeguard actions back then. This evidence alone proves that Tsai did not have or submit a proper thesis. Her PhD is not real. The fifth piece of evidence is that Tsai Ing-wen nor her thesis are registered in IALS's sequential numbering system. This is very important. The numbering system is where Tsai meets a dead end and she can't get away. There's no way to lie your way into the numbering system. Take a look. This is the University of London IALS's catalog. The catalog gives each thesis a number: 601, 602, 603, 604, 605, 606, 607, 608. The numbers are sequential. This number is 61. It broke order because it's from 1958. But all of the other theses are labeled in sequential manner. When we come to 1984, we find someone who graduated with a PhD in law. This person graduated with a law PhD from LSE in 1984. There were two people who graduated with law PhDs from the school that year. One was Smith, the other was Molina. There should be a third, Tsai Ing-wen, but her thesis is not listed here. See for yourself. Molina, 1984, thesis number 637. Think about it. How is Tsai going to get a thesis put in this system? She can't. I have records and screenshots. How is she going to get away with it?
So I went to this website and followed the steps according to the last clip. So these are the theses from 1982 to 1984 at IALS. Some of the entries do not have a name listed because there are multiple volumes. I clicked on all of them, but none of them are Tsai Ing-wen's thesis. Her draft document is not a multi-volume thesis, so it wouldn't be listed like that anyway. This is thesis 635. As you can see, it's not hers. I suggest the viewer go to the website and go through these steps themselves. It's far more real when you do it yourself. So these screenshots of theses from 1982 to 1984 from IALS prove conclusively that Tsai Ing-wen does not have a thesis on record. Therefore, she cannot use the excuse that the library lost her thesis. An electronic record of her thesis in the IALS system should have been there from 1984. She should have a 3-digit serial number that she's willing to give publicly. However, there was never any mention of a 3-digit serial number from the presidential office or Tsai Ing-wen herself.
学位是真的假不了啊，有学位就是一定有论文啊，所以这个也假不了。我有3个 examiner， 是3个口试委员。这个因为我的论文是法律跟经济的混合体，所以一个是我的指导老师。一个是经济学家，一个是学法律。那个律师就说你的经济部分写的不错，那个经济学家说我法律的部分写的不错。这个大概是有史以来伦敦政经学院最令人惊奇的这个博士论文考试。然后最后他们决定给我1.5个学位。
So after saying all that to a bunch of her supporters in 2011, Tsai Ing-wen has refused to name these thesis examiners, the economics and law professor that thought so highly of her that they gave her 1.5 PhD degrees, like that's even possible. Michael Richardson, a US blogger and reporter, had to use the Freedom of Information Act in the UK to request the names of these so-called external examiners. Needless to say, it's been a very long journey trying to get the names of these so-called examiners from LSE and the University of London, as well as the Information Commissioner's Office of the UK government. This Richardson article dated September 21st, 2021 reads, United Kingdom Court upholds University of London secrecy over Republic of China President Tsai Ing-wen PhD thesis examination. In short, the Information Review Tribunal refused to release the names of the so-called thesis examiners over privacy issues, or so-called privacy issues for Tsai Ing-wen. They said it would cause damage and distress to Tsai Ing-wen if these so-called names were to be released. This Richardson article dated October 16, 2021 reads, Appeal application filed in United Kingdom Court over Tsai Ing-wen thesis secrecy. So the drama continues over these so-called external examiners. This Richardson article is dated November 22, 2021. Republic of China in-exile arrest warrant against Taiwan newsman Dennis Peng for comments about President Tsai Ing-wen PhD thesis cannot be enforced in the United States. Well, that's how it goes in Taiwan when Tsai Ing-wen's president and she's trying to cover up her fake PhD, among other things.
The complainant has requested the names of the examiners. The complainant 就是这个投诉人 has requested 就是提出了要求 the names of the examiners 口试委员的姓名 who examined the then Miss Tsai Ing-wen, now President of Taiwan. 这个谁呢？这个口试委员是负责口试当时的蔡英文小姐，现在的蔡英文总统。什么事呢？ For her PhD and the report from her viva. The Council of London School of Economics and Political Science 括号 the LSE 好，就是伦敦政经学院 denied 否认 holding the requested information 伦敦政经学院否认他们拥有 Michael Richardson 所要求的资料 The commissioner's decision is that 中间还有一句废话叫做On the balance of probabilities, the LSE does not hold the requested information.
Okay, so what that means to me is that the Information Commissioner's Office is telling Michael Richardson, based on his Freedom of Information Act request, that the London School of Economics and Political Science does not hold the requested information. That means they do not have the names of the so-called examiners who examined her so-called thesis. In other words, if they do not have the names of these so-called external examiners, she could not have an approved thesis because she did not go through a viva examination. And if she doesn't have an approved thesis, which we can't find in the card catalog of the required libraries IALS and Senate House Library anyway, then she doesn't have a real PhD degree. Tsai likes to use reverse logic by saying if she has a degree, she must have a thesis. But by that logic, we can also say she must have an approved thesis in order to have a real PhD degree from the London School of Economics. Does this settle the issue? I'm sure it doesn't, but it's a step forward. At the very least, now that the London School of Economics and Political Science has officially admitted to the Information Commissioner's Office that they do not have the names of these so-called examiners, now they can take down that so-called in the press declaration that Tsai Ing-wen has a real PhD and that her thesis is in the Senate House Library and IALS. Obviously, it couldn't be in there, and wherever else it is allegedly referenced, it couldn't possibly be a legitimate reference because she doesn't even have thesis examiners according to the London School of Economics. If she doesn't have a legitimate thesis or degree, perhaps they could also remove her online thesis from this site. Otherwise, they're being rather contradictory about the entire situation. When they talk to the Information Commissioner's Office, they say they don't have the information, implying that Tsai didn't take her viva examination and therefore doesn't have a thesis and therefore doesn't have a degree. But yet they allow this post to be on their In the Press website. And they also allow the personal copy of her thesis to be on this website for download. Can the London School of Economics and the University of London finally come clean officially about all of this?